to me, they became my heroes in life. They became my role models. Like these are the people who stood against dictatorship.
Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Our guest today is Zolal Habibi. And let me tell you guys about Zolal. She has an amazing bio. As a human rights advocate and member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, she works to amplify the voices of Iranians fighting for freedom and justice. Her activism began as a teenager, shaped profoundly by the loss of her father, a celebrated Iranian writer who was killed by the regime in 1988. Today, she engages with policymakers, journalists, and civil society leaders worldwide to expose human rights abuses in Iran and support the movement for a democratic, secular republic. Zolal, we are so excited to talk to you and to hear about all of your work. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to join your listeners, viewers on Madness Cafe.
Thank you. It would probably be best to start in a painful spot for you with the loss of your father. Can you tell us how that sparked your activism?
I think I have to go a bit before that to start it. The reality is my parents came to the US before the revolution. So I'm from the generation that was born after the revolution, and I've never actually seen Iran. I was born and raised in the US. But very early on, I became acquainted with the situation in Iran, especially because of my dad's work and his activities. I think I was 4 years old, the first time I met people who were victims of torture. And I still have like these vivid memories of that because they came and they actually stayed with us for about 2 weeks while they were going to the United Nations and the US Congress to testify. My father was working with them and also their translator here and there. So I had the chance to get to know these people directly, and they made a major impact on me. Especially, I remember one of them told me, that he had a daughter who was about a year older than I was, and so that automatically made me like connect with him. And the fact that I had seen his pictures before in newspapers of how severe he was tortured. They all tried to hide it from me because they're like, she's a child, she shouldn't see these things, she shouldn't be hearing about this. So my parents were very open. They're like, no, she has to know that these are the realities of what's going on in Iran. These are the realities children her age in Iran come face to face with. So they told me their stories because I forced them to, but rated G version for a child instead of the reality. And to me, they became my heroes in life. They became my role models. Like these are the people who stood against dictatorship. That really had a major impact on me. And then fast forward summer of 1988. That summer, I was in DC actually visiting with my aunt who had just come from Iran. And that summer, my father was killed by the Iranian regime. That summer, 30,000, just to give you some context, 30,000 people were executed in Iran in the summer of 1988, starting from mid-July till about end of September. So within like 5-6 weeks, a whole 30,000 of the elite of Iran, political prisoners, were all executed. It didn't just impact my life, it impacted, I think, the history of Iran because it's actually the largest massacre after World War II of political prisoners. Aside from my father, there were a lot of people that I knew who had also been killed during that time. And I knew like a whole bunch of my friends who, they had lost their parents too. And that really changed my outlook on a lot of things. First of all, I started to realize that the regime's crimes know no borders. It doesn't matter where you are, they'd still be targeted. For the Iranian regime, it was very important to eliminate the elite, the people who were the voice of the Iranian people. Unfortunately, after my father, for instance, two of my dad's colleagues were also assassinated, one in Geneva, about a few miles away from the UN building, and then one in Italy. And so that was something that became a part of life for me, that I knew, like, this is it. This is the price that we have to pay for freedom in Iran. And unfortunately, it's continuous. That really had the effect on me. But what is interesting now that I look back is the fact that I always considered myself to be one of the lucky ones. I didn't think that I was a victim, or sort of say, because I knew so many people who had a worse situation than we did. I was always grateful that at least I'm growing up in a democracy. I have the opportunities ahead of me. I can do whatever I want. I have those basic rights that people in Iran are denied. I remember I had a friend who, she had been arrested with her parents when she was 5. And as one of the methods of torture, the regime would make her watch her father be tortured. And this is how they wanted to, aside from the physical, this is how they wanted to break the prisoner, because no parent wants to see their children suffer like that, you know?
No.
And
no.
the hardest part is that her father actually ended up dying under torture a few months later. I remember growing up that she would have these nightmares in the middle of the night, you know, just waking up like with a fever and just crying because those images would still be in her mind.
Of course, yes.
The thing is that during the day when you talk to her, she had blocked that out, and she didn't remember. She said, I don't remember, I don't know, I don't remember anything. But it was still with her. And so I saw those things. And so seeing that and understanding that really gave me a different perspective. And or I knew people who like had lost both of their parents, or like their entire families were wiped out. There are people who I currently know that, like, for instance, from a 7-member family, only 1 or 2 have survived. All of them were executed. And like the youngest child who survived was 7. So just imagine like losing your parent, both your parents, your siblings, everyone that was around you, and having to grow up with that. So I always thought that, you know, I am living a privileged life in comparison to those who are inside of Iran. Growing up, after a few years, that I felt like that brought a responsibility. What is my responsibility if I have this privilege to be able to live this life? What is my responsibility towards those who don't? That really impacted me. So I was active from childhood. I just on Tuesday, on the 23rd, we have a rally in New York, and thousands of people will be gathered there simultaneous with the UNGA, and the fact that Pezeshkian, the current so-called president of the regime, will be in attendance. We were just speaking with a few people just the other day and I said, well, since I could remember, this protest has been going on every year in September since I was a child. I remember going there when I was 3, 4 years old. And so they're like, yeah, well, it's for 40 something years, this protest has been going on every year. But that's how dedicated the Iranian diaspora is to be able to raise awareness on what is happening in Iran. I was about 12 the first time that I actually started going on Capitol Hill and, you know, meeting with offices and members of Congress to brief them about the human rights situation in Iran. So you can imagine, like, a 12-year-old. I remember it was the spring break of my 6th grade, and I went to the office of like one of the members of Congress, and the congressman was really impressed, and he was like, I will definitely sign this resolution. And I was like, thank you. And he said, well, no, I should be thanking you, and just be sure there are a lot of other people who are going to sign on if you go to that. And I was like, well, and he said, why are you spending your spring break coming here? And I was like, because it's important. Those people don't have a voice. I can be their voice. So that's what's important to me.
Wow.
So continuing, fast forward a few years, I think it was the summer of 1999, there was the student uprisings in Iran. I don't know if you guys remember that. There was like the pictures of the students protesting in Iran. And that was like a new phenomenon at the time, because after June 20th, 1981, was the last peaceful protest in Iran.
Wow.
That day, the Iranian regime opened fire on protesters, and thousands of people were killed, either arrested or killed that day, or they were arrested and then they were executed in the next days. Following June 20th, 1981, every day, if you go back into the archives of newspapers, and the newspapers of Iran, every day they would publish a list of names of people who had been executed that day. And
Wow.
that's how Khomeini was able to hold his grip on power and become dominant by spreading fear in society. Just imagine growing up in a society that every day you wake up to a list of people who had been executed the day before. And we still have like the newspapers of sometimes they would publish, like there's one, it's from 1 week, I think after, it's June 27th or so. It has the pictures of a whole bunch of teenage girls who have been executed. They've been beaten. So in the picture, it's like you could tell that they've been beaten. And it says, would the parents come and identify their bodies? Because we don't even know their names. We've just had them executed.
Oh my God.
That's
and then
so
they were
awful.
like 13, 14, 15-year-olds. So,
oh my God, that just hurts my heart.
Yeah, or like for instance, back then they had a lot of public executions. So what they would do is like early morning when people were going to work or going to school, they would just shut down a main square, and a lot of people had to pass through that to go to wherever they were going. They would just get stuck there because it would be closed, and then they would have a public hanging to spread fear in society. So just imagine a whole generation of children who grew up seeing that on daily basis or monthly basis in their cities. So that's how Khomeini was able to spread fear in society for no one to speak, for no one to do anything, because everyone had in their memory the 1980s.
Yeah.
Which the highest point of it was the 1988 massacre, where 30,000 were executed. But throughout the 1980s, it was the same thing. 120,000 people have been executed for their political beliefs alone in Iran.
Wow.
Oh my God.
That's a huge number. You said that you've been resisting, for lack of a better word, for 40 years. How do you continue to have hope?
I think that the struggle in itself, it's a science. Struggle is a science in itself.
Okay.
If you know the history, if you know the history of not only your own country, but revolutions throughout history, that's a very important context. Even though this, unfortunately, this has been a very long battle, I am proud to say that the main Iranian opposition movement, the main organization, it's called the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran. In short, in the US, they call it the MEK. It just celebrated its 60th anniversary of its formation. It was formed by 3 students back in 1975, and on September 6th, it celebrated its 60th anniversary.
Wow.
And what's interesting is some of those who were part of the first foundations of this movement are still fighting over half a century of continuous fighting without one day of taking one day off. That continuation, and that's generation after generation after generation that have been continuing this fight. And what for? They have fought against 2 dictatorships, both the monarchy, the Shah, because it was one state, it was a police state, and it was a classical dictatorship, so better situation than this one, but it was still a dictatorship. That's why the people revolted in the first place. And then the regime, the mullahs. And the thing is that even though this organization, it's rooted in their beliefs, like they're Muslims, but they believe in a secular democratic republic for the future of Iran, because they believe that there should be separation of church and state, or religion and state. This movement has been able to keep that hope alive, that flame of resistance alive. And they've paid the price for it. As I said, from over 100,000 people have been executed for supporting this movement alone. Even to this day, I mean, just on July 27th, 2 people were executed in Iran for supporting this movement. And right now there are 15 people on death row for supporting this movement. And there are hundreds in prison who are, their only charges supporting this movement. So it lives on and it carries on. And you see generation after generation after generation of Iranians. It's not something that's hereditary. So it's not like, but I mean, you see the new generation following suit.
Right.
And as I was saying before, I've diverted, but summer of 1999 was the turning point for me, myself, because summer of 1999, when the student uprising broke out, I had just graduated from high school. I had gotten full scholarship and I was going to go and study optometry. So that was like, I wanted to become a doctor and to be able to serve my people that way. But when that broke out, it was the first time after years, now our generation was coming to the scene. We had grown up, I remember from childhood, my parents always told us, it's their generation's responsibility to free Iran, and our generation's responsibility was to rebuild Iran. And that was like what I grew up with. So that was like, that was the goal. And I came to a point and I realized, well, maybe that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to free Iran first. I remember a year before that, it was the World Cup and it was in France that year. There was a game that they had made political. It was supposed to be, it was the time of Khatami. Khatami had come. The regime tried to present him as a moderate. They were saying, what was it called? Dialogue with civilizations and whatnot. And so the whole game was propped for it to be the US versus Iran. And that would be, fixing relations after, since 1979 till that was 1997. And we went to that game, and it was the first time I came face to face with people who were from the regime. I had always heard about the regime and the Revolutionary Guards or whatever, but coming face to face with them was something else. And that was a major turning point for a lot of people in my generation who had grown up abroad and had not seen Iran. I remember that summer I was going through a magazine, and it's a US based magazine, but it's in Farsi and it's called Javanam, which means youth. And it said there are 20,000 Iranian doctors in the US alone at that time. Now it's much more. I thought to myself, am I going to be one of those doctors? Or am I going to be one of those who frees Iran so they can go and actually serve their people? And so that was something that I had in the back of my head. And so when the uprisings began, I was like, I'm not going to be one of those who takes a plane and goes to Iran once it's freed. I need to be a part of this. So I decided to join the resistance actually this week, actually in three days. Yeah, 2 days. It'll be 26 years that I have been a member of the Iranian resistance.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I am blown away by your dedication and your bravery. I don't know how else to say it. Hearing you talk about how long this fight has been going on, I wonder what you would say to people here who are like, oh, we've been fighting for this change we already voted for that. And well, nothing's changed yet. We voted for this in the last election. It's only been a few years. Do you know what I mean? Like, I get so frustrated with people who are like, nothing's changed yet.
That's one of the things that we take for granted in the US. Being Iranian American, grown up and raised in the US, I understand the dilemma there and then on this side. And it's really the way that you look at things, the angle and the perspective. That's really important to have that understanding.
Right.
First of all, to have the understanding that change is not something that happens overnight. I think it's important not to give up hope, what you guys pointed out before, and to just be able to keep focus. That's really difficult. I mean, especially like when it comes to our movement, there are a lot of players in this field. Unfortunately, the policy of Western governments, the US, Europe, in the past 40 years has been a policy of appeasement toward Iran. They thought that maybe with dialogue and with diplomatic means, we can negotiate. But it's not a fair ground to negotiate with. I mean, you're negotiating with a dictator that sees no borders when it comes to keeping its power. This is the same regime that in the Iran-Iraq war, Khomeini kept the war going because he knew that the minute the war stops, people are going to start asking questions, because the war started like a few months after the revolution, and Khomeini actually needed that war because people have revolted for freedom. Once they see those freedoms are missing, they're not going to give in to that. But what did he do? By going into this war and extending this war, he kept people quiet by saying, look, we have a foreign enemy, so keep quiet. We need to rally under the flag right now, right? And with that, there's his quotes. He says, "We will continue the war till the last house is standing in Tehran." And he said, this war is holy. It's a holy war. The path to Jerusalem goes through Karbala and whatnot. The fact is that after 2 years, Iraq pulled out completely from Iranian soil. But 6 years on later, I mean, the war still continued for 6 years.
Right.
Why? Because Khomeini needed that to be able to keep power. Unfortunately, 450,000 children were taken to the war zone to open minefields.
Oh my
God.
God.
One of the things that the regime, I mean, just imagine like a regime that's willing to do that with its future generation. So just imagine they would go to schools, they would take these children from elementary school and put them on buses, take them to the fields, and they would give them these plastic gold keys, and they would tell them that this is the key to heaven. So you put this around your neck, we wrap you in a blanket, and then they would open them on the minefield. And then they said, when then you'll go to heaven because you have this key. A whole generation was killed that way. So a regime that is that brutal, a regime that executes 13-year-olds for their political views. I don't know how much a 13-year-old knows about politics to be executed based on that. But a regime who does all of that, do you think that they are someone that you can negotiate with diplomatically?
No.
Yeah, and unfortunately, though, that's what's happened. And who has paid the price for it? The Iranian people, and specifically the resistance. In 1997, so the State Department placed the name of the Iranian resistance movement on the terror list. This is at a time that Al-Qaeda wasn't even on the terror list. It was just like something that they had just come up with. And they actually, there's an LA Times article that still exists, and it's from that briefing. And the spokesperson of the State Department announces that as a goodwill gesture to the newly elected moderate president of Iran, we are placing the Iranian resistance on the terror list because this is what Iran had requested.
Yeah.
And it was a goodwill gesture, so it was not based on any facts or anything, but it took the resistance 15 years to be taken off the list by going through every possible court in the US. The highest courts in the US actually voted on this, and then finally they were able to get that verdict. Every time actually the courts voted, I mean, the verdict was in support of the resistance, but every time they would say, but due to national security issues, we're not going to follow through. And then finally, this was done, and they were removed from the terrorist. But the price that was paid for it, it really extended the lifeline of the regime. Right. Because the hands of the movement were tied, and instead of fighting the regime, they had to first resolve this issue with being on the terrorist list. So, I mean, the price that has been paid has been very high by the Iranian people. We saw it in the 2009 uprisings, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2023. Every time, right now, 2022, sorry. Right now, this week marked the anniversary, the 3rd anniversary of the uprisings in Iran after the death of Mahsa Amini. The world saw how the Iranian people came to the streets. But unfortunately, the international community, they gave that signal to the Iranian regime that, we don't want you overthrown or anything. That's what gave the regime that open, hand to suppress and kill. And that's how the regime has been able to stay afloat. And right now, in recent years, we've seen like the hostage diplomacy that the regime has partaken. how many, the regime is, instead of negotiations and diplomacy, what are they doing? They're taking hostages and then exchanging them for whatever they need.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's the price that the Iranian people are paying at the end of the day. So that's what we've been up against. But I think one of the things that's important to note, you asked, how do you keep that hope alive? For me, I take pride in the history of our movement and how it has been able to overcome. We have really, because of the complexity of this fight, we have been able to overcome things that are really unprecedented in history. And we've actually been trailblazers really in the women's movement. The leader of the Iranian resistance is a woman. Her name is Maryam Rajabi. She has led this movement from 1985 till now, practically. And she has brought on a new theory when it comes to women. And what she has done is she changed the whole structure of this movement. This movement has been led entirely by women from 1993 till now. So at a time when, right, this year we're celebrating Beijing plus 30, right? When the world was saying, like back then, in Beijing, the world was like in awe by the statement, women's rights are human rights, right? That's where we were. At that time, it had already been 2 years that this movement had been led entirely by women. So they were in the highest positions in political realm, military, everything, and that is something that's unprecedented in history. And it's not that the roles have been changed. In fact, we see the men have become more active, taking on more responsibility. They see that emancipation of both men and women goes through women's leadership.
Yes,
and this is something that it's not just a theory. It's not just, it's been practiced.
It is a fact.
Yeah, for over 30 years now, this has been practiced by this movement. So along the way, we've come very far. And I think that a lot of people, when they saw what they saw in Iran 3 years ago, they were in awe by the women of Iran. But that's not something that brewed overnight. That's something that's been in the making. So just imagine, like, for instance, our generation. I remember when Mrs. Rajabi was chosen as the president-elect of the Iranian resistance for the interim government, I was 12 years old. And she had a motto, she still has this motto, she says, "Mitavan va bayad." It means we can and we must. And so with that, I grew up with that statement, like everything, it didn't matter what it was, like even in school, I was like, we can and we must. So I have to, do this. I have to get a good grade. I have to get a full scholarship. I have to. And we had so many role models in front of us, like a whole generation of women who had broken all glass ceilings imaginable. And so we never thought, patriarchy didn't really have an effect on us because we grew up seeing in front of us on day-to-day basis these women who had overcome everything. We couldn't imagine it being any other way, really. And so even in people inside of Iran, they might not be in direct contact with this movement, but in the collective mind of this,
they know
culture,
it. They know it's there.
They know that it's there and it's active because the regime reacts to it constantly. So women look at every aspect of their presence in society as a way to stand against this regime. So be it that they have, in Iran, we have a higher education rate of, like, in college and universities of women than men. Even though there isn't any, positive discrimination for women, it's the other way around. But despite that, over 60% of college students are women. We see them defying the regime in every aspect of it. Why? Because, at the end, they know that there have been these women have done that. There have been a whole generation, 40,000 women have been executed by this regime. Mothers,
Wow.
daughters, true leaders. And the reality is that the tortures that the regime has done on women, it's uncomparable to what they do to them. The women have suffered so much more, but they were resistant. Like practically when you look at the 1988 massacre, there are very, very few women who have survived. Because they all actually stood their ground and they were executed. And this is something that it still lives on, even if you don't know the facts, it lives on in society. These stories, it has its impact. And I think that is something that gives us the ambition and the inspiration to continue. And we know that, if we are able to create change in Iran, it's not going to be limited to Iran. I think it's going to have its ripple effect.
Yep.
Not only in the region, but I think worldwide. Once people start, unfortunately, we've been so concentrated on our fight against the regime, and we have so many burning points, unfortunately, we haven't been able to really present the viewpoints of Mrs. Rajavi extensively. Those who do come in contact with it, it really changes their mindset and everything. But just imagine the day that Iran is free and she could actually present this to the world. I think that it will have major impact on the next generation of women, young girls, just to see that, just to have that, first of all, it'll change, it'll have like a major impact, I think, in a lot of different regards. And I think that that's something that inspires me personally, myself, because I feel that we have a very bright future ahead of us that we can create. And we look forward to that day. And so one of the things that we do, even though we are so involved in our fight on day-to-day basis, like for instance, if you look at our movement, one of our major events, we have a lot of events throughout the year, but one of the major events that we have every year is International Women's Day Conference. And there, Mrs. Rajavi, every year, she presents how far we've come in the past year in regards to this movement and, women's emancipation and the hurdles that we've overcome. So I know female like professors or personalities who've been attending this conference from back in the 1990s, but this is what they look forward to every year because they know that this is something that the world needs to hear and learn about.
And embrace.
Yeah.
Would you say that her leadership style is more matriarchal than it is patriarchal?
I think that, yeah, to a certain extent,
or maybe something entirely different.
Yeah, I think it's something more entirely different than to say, because I think that one of the things that she always emphasizes on, if you look at her interviews or any way that she's discussed this issue, she said the issue is creating equality.
Yes.
If you want to create equality, because all human beings are made as equals. If you have to have that in your mind first. So we're not fighting, we're not trying to, as I said before, we're not trying to change positions. In fact, we're trying to make everyone realize their potential and to take on that responsibility. But that needs equity first, because first we have to change our mindsets. For generations or centuries, unfortunately, women have been suppressed. So you need to change that mindset. It's been set from when you're born, practically. This is how you're raised. This is how you're taught these things, in society. So to revoke that, you need to create those platforms for these women to be able to take on responses, see their own potential, believe in themselves first, and then everyone else will believe in them too. And so this has been a whole process, but step by step, this movement has been able to do that. And in doing so, it's not only the potential, the hidden potential of women that is being revived, but also the hidden potential of men, because it's shackles on them too. So it's really freeing both,
It's for everybody.
human beings. It's not an
Yes.
issue of women and men, because I think unfortunately some women activists or feminists, they get this a bit wrong. But
Agreed.
I think what's important is to understand that we're trying to emancipate human
Everyone.
beings, everyone. It
Right.
doesn't matter, your gender. And I think that is to be able to see each other as equals, not to think first, is this a man or is this a woman?
Yep.
How do I work, how do I treat that one and how do I treat this one? It needs to be,
This is a person.
seeing
How do
them
I
first
treat
as
this
human
person?
beings.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
See them as human being first before anything else. And I
Mhm.
think that's key.
Yeah.
I have two questions, and then Raquel, I won't ask another
I know
one.
we're both jockeying and ask the next question, but go ahead.
I have two things that have been burning on my mind. Number one, what does it feel like for you on a daily basis to never have been to one of your countries? Because you have two countries, and one you've never been able to go home to. And then my second question is, and this is a big question, do you fear the same thing is happening to the United States right now?
That was one of my questions too. Yeah.
Well, I'll answer the first question first. I think that even though I've never been to Iran, there hasn't been a day that Iran hasn't been on my mind. So I think that is what has shaped me. I remember, I could go back to my 4th birthday. I remember the wish I made on my birthday cake is that Iran will be free. My dad used to always tell me in 6 months. I would say like next year. And this was a joke in our family because everyone was like, Zola, we have all your New Year's cards from over the years. And all of them, you say next year we're going to be in a free Iran. And I was like, yeah, well, I've never lost that hope. And I still say that, and I'm still true to that. But I think that connection has always been there. So, and it's gotten stronger over the years, not weaker. So I think that is what gives me the motivation to continue to be able to make sure that we see the dawn of freedom in Iran. And
Yes.
I think that's something that makes all the sacrifices worthwhile. I think that the day that I look forward to the day that we will be able to really address the pains of the Iranian people and to be the remedy to that. I mean, I think that's one of the beauties of our movements, to be honest. Our movement is not about gaining power. Our movement is about sacrificing everything in our lives to make sure that we can restore power to the people and to be able to give them back their freedoms, their rights, but most of everything, more than everything, their trust, rebuild that trust in society again. And to just, I think that's really important. And so I think one of the reasons that people in Iran are able to trust this movement is the fact that they've seen this dedication, this self-sacrifice, the fact that we see no borders when it comes to giving. We're willing to give just logically, some people who are looking from Iran, they see me that, okay, she was born and raised in the US, which is like the ideal for them. And she could have had the best life, but she put that all aside for us. So that's what's going to give you hope too, that, there are people who are willing to do that. And I think that is what's one of the beauties of this movement is the fact that no one is after power. No one is, if we wanted power, there are easier ways to gain power. Khomeini was willing to, the way they negotiate with everyone else, they would have been willing to negotiate with us if it meant us agreeing to his rule, but that's not what we were about. And I think that that's really important. So that's my connection to Iran. On a daily basis. The fact that unfortunately in Iran, 1,700 people have been executed just in the past year. 1 year, since August of last year till now, 1,700 people have been executed. This has to come to an end.
It has to.
The people of Iran have suffered enough.
Yeah.
And this is just people who are executed. This is aside from those who are killed on the street. This is aside from those who are, unfortunately, poverty has gotten so severe in Iran. People are starving to death. I mean, these are the crimes perpetrated by this regime. So we're not talking even about the domestic violence that has increased, because when this misogyny is written into law, just imagine the impact that it has. So, these things exist. In regards to your second question, I think that we still take for granted what we do have in the US.
Yeah.
I still think that there's a long way to go because, just look at the structure of our country, the constitution, the balances, the checks and balances that we have in the system, the judiciary, we have like the branches and everything. The fact that you still have these liberties,
for now,
thing is that we take it for granted, and the fact that we have the power to create change, like what Raquel, you were mentioning before. People are like, well, I voted, it should have changed. No, it doesn't work. It's not that simple. You need to work at it. We need to change. A lot of these things are things that we have to change in our culture, in our ways. It's not just a law or this politician or that politician. It's an issue of raising the level of awareness in society and building something new, because we need to keep on evolving, as we see technology evolving. Well, society needs to evolve too.
Agreed.
That comes with it. And I think that, the fact that we need to overcome these injustices that we see in society needs to be addressed. It needs, instead of fighting each other, we need to address them and raise awareness. Just instead of, it's a tug of war. It shouldn't be that way. We need to raise awareness. We need to educate the younger generation, use the potential within the system to create change, because it still can be done. And that's really important. And instead of just, because one of the things that we see right now is just both sides are just going at each other's throats. It's not going to resolve anything. You need to, there are ways that you can resolve these issues and to be able to come out in a higher point, move forward, instead of just antagonist, back and forth. So I think that that's important to understand, value what we do have, and build on that, build on it. Don't be satisfied with what it is, or just don't give in to the status quo, but build on that and go step by step towards the goal that you have for society. And understand that in no society, you're never going to find a society that everyone agrees on everything. It's not going to be that way. There are different type of people, different viewpoints, different upbringings, everything. So find those common grounds and then work together toward a better future.
Okay, I love and thoroughly appreciate your optimism. I really do. I just have to say that. So thank you for that. And that actually brings me to one of my questions, which was on the website for the National Council of Resistance of Iran. There's mention of the Free Iran 10-point plan. Can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, I think it's one of the things that really struck me as I was looking at the website and learning about the organization is, I mean, there's a plan. There's a plan in place, and it's not just, okay, this is what we need to do to get to, this first point. There's like, okay, once this is toppled, we have this that will be in place for 6 months, and then we'll work toward that. Like, I am blown away, and we have so much to learn from that. So please, please, please tell us about the 10-point plan.
first of all, before that, because you pointed out, the NCRI, they serve as like a parliament in exile, and it is for interim government for the transition time, so 6 months. And then the constitution will be written. That'll take about like 2 years probably, and then there will be free elections. There's a whole complete plan for all of that, the transition time, everything. I mean, everything has been written down and worked on. It's the building blocks of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, and that's what everyone agrees on. And because there are different parties or viewpoints represented in the National Council of Resistance of Iran. From all of that, those plans, Mrs. Rajavi has drafted like a 10-point plan. Just this is like the short version, I guess, of the whole plans of the NCRI. The 10-point plan, which was presented about 20 years ago, it gives you an outline of what a free Iran will look like. First of all, there is that the ballot box is the main criterion in the future of Iran. So that in itself goes against all forms of dictatorship that we have seen in Iran. So against both the monarchy and the theocracy. So a democratic republic will be in place. The second point, let me just say from importance, from my perspective, maybe not the second point. The other issue that's really important in the 10-point plan presented by Ms. Rajavi is the separation of church and state, the separation of religion and state. So we will have a secular government. Then there's freedom of speech, freedom of political parties, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, and the internet. The complete disbanding of all of the suppressive forces right now in Iran, because unfortunately the regime has over 32 suppressive organs. So the disbanding of the Revolutionary Guards, the Quds Force, the Basiji forces, plainclothes, Ministry of Intelligence, all of that. These vigilantes that the regime has, so that has to be dissolved completely.
Kind of like ICE.
Yeah, kind of. And then there is a commitment to individual and social freedoms and rights, and in accordance to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Interesting fact or fun fact here is that, fortunately, Iran was the first country to have the Human Rights Declaration, right? And unfortunately, this is the situation of our country. So the first human rights charter is rooted back in Iran from thousands of years ago. And that's what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is based on. But unfortunately, this is how our people are suffering now. And that's what makes it so hard for Iranians, because they know that they have that rich history. And we were the first country to have, a declaration for human rights. But unfortunately, this is the situation. What's important is that the 10-point plan abolishes the death penalty and prohibits torture. So it's an end to this cycle of execution and torture and death, which we've seen under both dictatorships. What we spoke about before, but complete gender equality and the realms of political, social, cultural, and economic rights, and equal participation of women in political leadership, and abolishment of any form of discrimination, because women need to be able to choose freely in every aspect of their lives. An independent judiciary and legal system, consistent with international standards, of course, and then the autonomy for the different ethnicities in Iran, the autonomy of, like, for instance, the Iranian Kurdistan, and removal of all the double injustices that unfortunately ethnic minorities or different ethnicities in Iran have suffered. And this is really important. The other is justice and equal opportunities in the realm of, employment and entrepreneurship, to have a free market economy in Iran, And then there's protection and rehabilitation of the environment. But because unfortunately, under this regime, Iran has one of the worst environmental status right now. So this is also one of the issues that we need to address as a society. And then also a non-nuclear Iran. Yeah. That is what we support, and a country that coexists in peace and in the region and with its neighbors, because unfortunately Iran right now is the destabilizing force in the region, unfortunately, and then in the world to a great extent. We've seen its support for terrorist organizations, the proxies of the Iranian regime. And so I think that once we see a free Iran, we'll see maybe peace in the region, and we will be working toward that. So I think that Iran has always had a very important geopolitical role in, if you look at history in the Middle East, because it's a very key country there. So once, unfortunately, if you look back in history, like for instance, when we had Dr. Mossadegh in Iran, who was the only democratic government that we've ever had, but which was unfortunately overthrown with the coup d'etat by the US and Britain. But during that time, when he nationalized oil, we saw that nationalistic movements growing in the Middle East, and that was ending a lot of the unfortunately at that time they were colonized, a lot of these countries, or they were under the influence of foreign countries, and they started to become independent. So we saw that effect. 1979 revolution, unfortunately, when mullahs came, we saw the growth of fundamentalism in the region. So just imagine when that changes, we will be able to see maybe freedom and prosperity flourish in the region. And I think that'll have an impact in the international realm too.
Wow. Well, my
just to add one more thing, sorry.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
Aside from the 10-point plan, Mrs. Rajavi also has a 12-point plan when it comes to women's rights, which goes into more detail. There's also like the plan for the separation of religion and state. There's also, these, as I said, the autonomy of the ethnicities, that's also a separate plan. So we have all of those plans at hand to be able to make sure that we can this roadmap is practical and something that you could actually do. It's not just mere words, or there's action behind it.
Well, I am beyond impressed, and honestly, there's so much that we can learn from this. We can look to the resistance and the continued resistance. I mean, there's this long history of, like you said, resistance in exile, as well as resistance within Iran. We can learn from that. I mean, we can look to all that and just say, okay, other people can do this. People who are in as much as our country is going through right now, we are not in that position yet, but we can learn from and take lessons from the dedication that Iranians have continued to show over time. From listening to you, Zolal, and hearing about everything that's going on and what y'all are planning and what you're learning from, I don't see that dedication waning anytime soon. And I think that's incredibly, it's so inspiring. And I'm in complete awe of the strength and the strength and the resistance. So my hat is off to you.
Thank you. Just to add that on 6th of September 6th, we had a rally in Brussels, and tens of thousands of people were in attendance. one of the things that drew everyone's attention was the presence of the youth. And not just that they were there, they were organizers. They were the ones who were, bringing everything together in a lot of the sense and different aspects of the program. And so one of the questions that has been raised, especially in Iranian circles, is what has been the key, or like how is it that this movement has that potential to draw and attract the youth? Because in every country that you go right now, this is like an issue that their younger generation, they're like, just like, no, and this is like working for us. But the fact that this movement has that potential to attract so many young people, both inside of Iran with the resistance units that are increasing daily in Iran. They had 39,000 activities in 1 year last year, and it's growing, even despite being the mass arrest, the execution sentences, everything. They're growing stronger and stronger, and you see the youth presence there. And then abroad, these are people who, some of them, not only have they not seen Iran, their parents haven't seen Iran. And still they are so dedicated to this movement, and they actually put in time and effort. It's not just, they really make place for this movement on a daily basis in their lives. And so that is something that drew everyone's attention. It was really inspiring. I think also on Tuesday, that'll be also seen in New York and the demonstration there.
I love that. And I just want to point out one thing. This has been going on for years and years and years. I think this is incredibly important, and this is talked about on the website, or maybe I saw it on your Instagram, I can't remember, but there's talk of holding on to your smile as an act of defiance. And my takeaway for that is kind of the saying, don't let the bastards get you down. Yeah, there's a lot of hard work that's going into this. It's difficult, and there's misery, and there's pain, and there's fight, but there's also joy. You can't let them steal your joy. Joy is just as important in the resistance as the fight.
Well, this is the thing. When I was growing up, we had this story that within the resistance, like it was a children's story. It was a story of the city without smiles. And the story was that there was this, tyrant. He had lost his smile. And so he was trying to take away people's smile and fit it on his own mouth, but each person has their individual and unique smile. So you can't fit someone else's smile on yours. So it was telling the story of, all the executions that were happening, but it was the story of like, he would take their smile, it wouldn't fit and whatnot. And then they came and overthrew him, those children and whatnot. So I grew up with that story. That was like something that was my bedtime story, growing up and listening to it and whatnot. That was one of my favorite stories. When my father died, my mom at the time, you could just imagine, she was 25 with a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old. And she was just, trying to come to terms with how do I tell her this, so she was procrastinating and trying to see how far she could go. So she hadn't told me anything. And I just thought that my dad was traveling, because my dad traveled a lot. One day I ran into a newspaper that had 3 pictures of my dad in it with a poem dedicated to me and my brother as my father went on a trip. Like, that's the translation in Farsi, but it's like, my mom walked in, seeing that I'm looking at this page, and she was just like shocked. So she pulled me away, and she, explained to me, she's like, a lot of people you knew were killed, and this has happened, this and that. And then she said, one of them was your dad. And so I remember I was daddy's little girl. I had like this special connection with my dad, especially since my dad, since he was a writer, he was at home more with us than my mom, when my mom would be working or whatnot. So I cried like 3 hours straight. And then my brother was coming home and so my mom was like, Zola, please, you need to stop crying, because if your brother sees you crying, he's going to know something's wrong. And so I was trying to control, myself and my tears. And so I remember, talking to myself and saying, like, you crying is not going to resolve any issues. But it will make Khomeini happy to see you cry. So, as defiance, you need to stop crying and not cry anymore over this issue. So I made like a promise to myself, 7 years old, that I wouldn't cry. And after that, I did not cry till 9 years later, even though it was very turbulent years. There are stories that we don't have time. It doesn't fit in your podcast today. We were separated from my mom and really difficult situations, but still, I kept at that promise. I was like, no, I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to let Khomeini be happy. Yeah, that's where the keeping that smile comes from. It's really important to, first of all, be grateful for what you have. There's a saying, we're only tested as much as we have the capability to pass. So these are what builds us. This is what makes us stronger. We have a saying in the resistance, we say, Bia, Bia. Bia means come. So we always say, in face of all the hardships, just tell it to come on, take it on. We have that capability and that capacity to take it on, even though sometimes it might be, how they say there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We had a saying, like one of my colleagues, she would say that we see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not sure if it's the light at the end of the tunnel or it's the next train coming to try to run us over, but we see the light. So that is our story, and that is the struggle of the Iranian people. So we need to keep continuing at it and just not give up, not give in. And that's really important.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful.
Yeah. I want to hug little 7-year-old Zolal. I just want to give her a big old hug. Zolal, thank you so much for the work that you do and the work that the resistance is doing, has done, continues to do. It's so impressive. So impressive. I'm in awe of you and the organization, and I have so much respect for what y'all are doing.
Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it, and we need that solidarity.
We do. Let's do our recap. Quick recap.
We have so much to learn from the fight of the Iranian people and the dedication to free Iran and to bring about equity. And yeah, and that's why education is so important too, right? Like to learn about what's going on in other countries, to look to even our own history of dedication and resistance. There's so much to learn from that, and there's so much to take from that. Yeah, I mean, how lucky are we that you and I get to speak to Zolal and learn about the resistance, and then to amplify what they're doing and present this to our listeners so that they can learn about it too, and then spread the word. So often in society, people have to fight for what should just be a given, but the fight is winnable, right? It just takes time, and we can't give in. I'm beyond impressed.
We can and we must.
We can and we must, absolutely.
To me, I think what I'll take away today is, number one, I'm truly, truly, truly touched. But also, I think what they do have in the resistance, I think it actually is a matriarchy. And I will say that because I've been looking into it lately. And a matriarchy is not the opposite of a patriarchy.
Absolutely.
It's not women taking power. A matriarchy is nurturing, it's planning, it's supportive. And the fact that we're talking about equity and equality for all people, for men and women alike, that's a matriarchy. And maybe we're right back here to like these words, feminism. Like we don't want to use those words because we don't want to alienate people. Maybe we never want to use matriarchy because we don't want to alienate people. But what it is a stewardship,
Mhm.
a stewardship of the people. The fact that the resistance says they don't want power tells me it's something different. We
Mhm.
are building something different here.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the resistance of Iran is the resistance of everyone.
Mhm.
We are all connected. We are all one.
Amen.
We are one human people.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And I don't think it matters what we call it. They're building something new.
Mhm. But I will say, and I know we do this every time, but I think it is important to use the words matriarchy and feminism because we need to make sure that people understand what those words really mean, not what people who are opposed to those things
But who
have said that
cares?
those definitions are.
But who cares?
I care
But who cares?
because words have power. Words have power. We have
Yes,
said that
but if
over
we're
and over
building,
again.
if the choice would be this, you could have the matriarchy and everything it stands for if you chose to call it something else. But if you chose to call it that, we would constantly be in a war, the patriarchy versus the matriarchy.
Then I think
So
it just means that education has to be a bigger part of it. And I do.
you
I
are
don't know.
so stubborn.
Well,
You
yeah.
are so stubborn.
A little bit. A little bit.
Hey, what if we just called it freedomocracy?
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Oh,
That yeah, that works.
what we want is freedom.
What we want is equity and freedom.
Equity and freedom for everyone.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
entire world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
gonna throw down, Raquel.
Right. Maybe that means I'm a very stubborn optimist, but or
Oh,
whatever. But
the optimism here today. This discussion with Zolal gave me optimism, something I haven't been feeling in a while. What was it? We can and
we
we
can
must.
and we must.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, and the other thing that she said that I will really, just one quick little thing.
Sure.
I never heard anybody call it this before. Once misogyny was written into law.
Mhm.
I think that is what we are on the brink of right now of this country. Is the
Mhm.
misogyny. We
Written into
must
law.
resist that process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in resisting that process, we have to present something to replace that, right?
Building something new.
Building something new, and we have to have something tangible to show people. That's one of the things that I truly appreciate about the resistance is that they have the 10-point plan. They have the 6-month plan. They have like
What's the lead?
that is one thing that we like here in the US can take from this is yeah, we can tell people, "Oh, we have to fight fascism," but okay, but what are we going to replace it with?
Right.
Because what was here before
Wasn't working.
wasn't the absolute best.
No, because it's capitalistic patriarchy.
Right. So we need to have a plan for people to look to.
And this is what I wonder. What's the woman's name that is the leader of the resistance?
Maryam Rajavi.
Maryam Rajavi.
Mhm.
I wonder what she would call the movement.
Mm. Mm.
I wonder what her word would be. I think we should
Yeah.
look into that.
Yeah. 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 I think I agree with you. I think that would be a really
Because
that would be a really important thing to know.
Because they have built that plan together as a
Mhm.
movement. And it's collaborative and
Yeah.
it's they're building a plan. I
Mhm.
wonder what name they would use.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
we could adopt.
Mhm. Or maybe they're in the same camp with you that like we don't give a shit what we call it, just have it.
Yeah.
You know?
Just let's free Iran.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in freeing Iran, free the rest of us too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Raquel.
Oh, what a great discussion. Thank you
Really,
so much,
truly,
Jennifer.
really, truly, this was so on point today.
Mhm. Mhm.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend.
Or you could leave us a comment and a 5-star review, or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks, everybody.